Okay, now we're here at the next section, and Crawford has told us that he wants to talk about the origins of shop class. So, how did it come to exist? Before we can talk about how it came to stop existing. So, what was its purpose? Who were the powers that be that decided that we needed it? What did they decide we needed it for? Okay, so, and he opens. Actually, not with a very specific anecdote that he can use, perhaps because he's going back to Teddy Roosevelt, and that's 19th century, so it's a good time ago. At a time when Teddy Roosevelt preached the strenuous life, and elites worried about their state of over-civilized spiritual decay, the project of getting back in touch with real life took various forms. That's a heck of an introduction to the topic. It takes us with Teddy Roosevelt, right? Strenuous life. Teddy Roosevelt was a president. Teddy Roosevelt was a Rough Rider. We associate Teddy Roosevelt with, I suppose, the idea of the basic man. He was obviously very intelligent, but also very closely connected to nature and the world. He started our conservation programs. It's why we have national parks like Yosemite, which is, I think, neat. But so he's kind of, if you like, a Spartan, a strenuous life, right? So I suppose living by one's own means without comforts and luxuries. So he is, once again, as we said, Crawford likes to put things in opposition. So we have the strenuous life, Teddy Roosevelt, very masculine and self-sufficient, as opposed to elites. And elites can be a very positive meaning word, as in, you know, elite athletes or elite students or so forth. It suggests, you know, the best of the best. But if you look at the verb, elites worried, that may suggest something negative. And elites worried about their state, well, it suggests the idea of more like elitism, like people who think that they are better than everybody else, and people who concern themselves with their own particular problems and are not concerned with everybody else. Elites worried about their state of over-civilized spiritual decay. So you can see how, once again, he is pairing the masculine with the deficient in masculinity, if you like. So he's, if you like, kind of effeminizing these elites and suggesting that they are lesser than the strenuous masculine types. Okay, worried over their over-civilized spiritual decay, which is to say that in the 19th century, this was when the Industrial Revolution was ongoing, and when people were separated, if you like, from the earth, from nature. Most people up until the 19th century were living on family farms and, you know, sort of making their own way that way, doing everything by hand with more basic tools than what we have now. And with the Industrial Revolution, we suddenly have something very different where people are leaving family farms en masse to go to big cities and work in factories. And this is happening all over Europe, somewhat before it's happening all over the United States. Quite a bit before, actually, by the numbers. Anyway, so these elites were interested in the project of getting back in touch with real life, and that took various forms. One of them was romantic fantasy about the pre-modern craftsman. And that romantic fantasy kind of turned into the hobbyist, the guy who putters in his basement. He characterizes these people as paper shufflers, which is to, again, effeminize and make seem unimportant the world of work with the brain. The tangible elements of craft were appealing to these people, right, because they could do something with their hands. It could be considered relaxing. Whereas, you know, if all of your work has to do with papers, files, cases, matters that white-collar work accomplishes that can give somebody vague feelings of unreality, feelings of helplessness, of diminished autonomy, maybe even a fragmented sense of self. And these things, actually, this is documented, people did have vague feelings of unreality, they did have diminished autonomy, and they did have fragmented senses of self because of these large shifts in the labor force and what people did. Arts and crafts movement thus fit easily with the new therapeutic, right, ethic of self-regeneration. So going down to the basement to build model ships was a form of relaxation and something that would get a man in touch with, his inner craftsman. Depleted from his work week in the corporate world, right, the exhausting brain work that he was doing from 9 to 5, the office worker repaired to his basement workshop to putter. T.J. Jackson Lears writes in his History of the Progressive Era, No Place of Grace, toward the end of the 19th century, many beneficiaries of modern culture began to feel that they were its secret victims, right? They began to blame the urban environment. They began to blame cubicles and offices for their feelings of disconnect. Various forms of anti-modernism gained wide currency. So feelings against the modern world, the Industrial Revolution, the machines, the modern life, the urban landscape. So feelings against those things gained wide currency in the middle and upper classes, including the ethic of craftsmanship. So what he's about to tell us, actually, is that that this was a form of self-absorption, really, that it was a way for middle and upper class men to turn inward toward themselves. They weren't making things that were of use to anybody. They weren't selling them because other people found a purpose in them. They were simply after the hobby. Those psychic hooks now relied upon by advertisers, so that's the odd thing. They became consumers, of course, of kits, buying things in boxes that were the little pieces that were manufactured by somebody else for a hobbyist to put together. They could buy the little tools that go with the kit to make the little toy cars and the little cans of paint to paint their little parts. That this was a form of self-absorption, that it was not real work. And that these hobbies represented a kind of compensation for the routinized and bureaucratic work that they were doing. And because it was compensating for that work, it was also accommodating that work. It was making that work more doable and more desirable because of this relaxation that they could have with the tools and the toys. But not everyone worked in an office. Indeed, there was a class conflict, right, between the haves and the have-nots, the lower classes and the middle classes and upper classes. And this is because we had judgments about unassimilated immigrants, right? People immigrating from other countries whose values we did not share and who were not meeting our desires as citizens. The unassimilated immigrants accumulating in American eastern cities. Serious labor violence in Chicago and elsewhere. Upper classes of those same cities who were enamored of the craft, they might remain satisfied with their material lot if they found joy in their labor. So these are two different needs or desires. Shop class could serve to put the proper spin on the manual work, could be artful if done in the proper spirit,